Mental health, a difficult conversation for many, but an important one to have. Life-saving care, sometimes as simple as a conversation, often goes missed. But when medical intervention is needed, how do you know? And are doctors prepared to provide it? May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm CBS 6's Lyra Brand, and tonight we're taking on this topic that's sometimes seen as taboo to talk about. We're breaking the stigma and breaking the silence. And here we are joined by our panel of people for our mental health discussion. I'm joined here by Dr. Cindy Stone. She's the Community Care Physicians Director of Integrated Behavioral Health Practice. We've also got Tawana Davis here from Russell Sage College, where she's the Associate VP for Student Life or Student Wellness. She's also the co-chair of Sage Thrive, which is a college-wide initiative to promote well-being. And then we've got Sharon Horton here as well. She's here to share some of her personal story about a loved one who has a mental illness and who can speak a little bit from that perspective. So first of all, thank you all for being here to talk about this very important topic today. I just want to start off by opening up the floor to all of you. You're all in the community in different ways, speaking with different people, different issues. What are you seeing as some of the biggest mental health or mental illness issues right now out there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that we see, I mean, there's obviously a lot of issues, but one of the biggest things that we see at Community Care Physicians is just trying to improve access to care. Access to care is just a really huge part, that people get the care when they need, and also remove the barriers to care, and normalizing it for people, that it's just as important as physical health, and acknowledging that and being able to get the care you need in a timely period of time.
Right, because stigma is such an issue, as we all know, when it comes to mental health and mental illness.
Right.
What about for you, Tawana and Sharon?
Hi, Lyra. So really one of the biggest issues, as you just said, is stigma. When people come to a college campus, they just want to be well, and they want to have fun, and they really want to just be normal, you know, the normal. And then when they're realizing that, hey, I may need a little bit of help, it's like, how do I seek it? That barrier of how do I seek it? What do I do? They don't have a parent there to navigate that for them. So it's first determining how do I get there, and then when they do decide that they do need that treatment, it's like, ugh, I need the treatment. So they determine that they need the treatment, then they figure it out, but then it's like, do I actually want to get it? And so then the next piece of that is, okay, so I need the treatment. And we have it readily available, but it's like, you have to walk down that long hallway to get it.
Yeah.
And they think everybody knows what they're doing. And people don't know because it's confidential.
Right.
So it's really getting people to go and get that treatment. So it really is a stigma of getting that treatment.
Yeah. Sharon, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously see both of those things too, but I think from a family perspective, it is really about supporting the person, the whole person, and involving the family or their support system in their care. I think that's a great barrier that I've experienced in my past with my loved one, is that, you know, once they have access treatment, it's really hard for the family members to support them in that, to get communication with the treatment team, even when there is a release signed. So I think it's just, for me, the barrier is involving the whole support system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because when we think of whole person care, we think of combining the mental and the physical.
Yep.
But I think including the family and the support system is a huge part of that.
It is a huge part of it, yeah. And Dr. Stone, I know that this practice, this behavioral health practice, is a little bit new and different. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at CCP right now?
Yeah, another great question. So it is, you know, integrated care is new in the sense that it's just kind of awakening across the nation, right? As far as timeline, it's really not new. Forms of integrated care started as late as the 80s. We've been in existence since about 2013 at Community Care, and pretty rapidly increasing our program and growing it, and not intentionally. It basically just grows by itself.
Yeah.
So the real premise of it is whole person care. that nobody is siloed, and family is involved, and the medical providers are involved, and the behavioral health providers are involved, and other members of the care team, maybe a nurse care manager, things like that. And we know that when we have all these different variables involved in the patient's care, that patients get better faster, which is the best news ever.
Yeah.
And B is, we can prove this with outcomes.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen such tremendous increase in our data with patient outcomes. It's just truly amazing. And, I could talk forever, and I certainly am not going to do that. But one thing that we do find also, and this is just really important, it increases patient satisfaction, which then increases patient adherence to treatment, whether it's medical or behavioral. And again, without treatment, people can't get better faster, so.
Yeah, and it seems like such a small thing, but I think we all know you go to one doctor's office, then you go to another, and you have to call both offices to see if one passed along the blood work to the other one. It's like a whole thing. So when you're all working together, it does, I would imagine, make it much easier.
And that's honestly the beauty of it. You hit the nail on their head, because literally you can go in to see your PCP for a sore throat, and you might have other things going on in your life. Like, let's say your mom just had some incident, and you're caring for your adult, your older mom, and you're very distressed and upset about it. Is it a mental health issue? No, but it's definitely a significant stressor. So you tell this to your primary care provider, and they can literally walk you down the hall to somebody who can help you kind of deal with that stress.
This is Carly Kemp in happier times, moments that her parents, John and Debbie, love to look back on.
Anything that we had her in that she loved, piano, she was the best piano player, ever.
Very artistic. Carly was, growing up as a child, the most energetic, fun, smiling all the time, thoughtful, caring, giving child, tons of friends, just always happy.
But in middle school, things started to change.
She went through a period of bullying in middle school, and that was prolonged for a period of time, and until one day she came to us and said she didn't want to go to school anymore, and from then forward, it went downhill.
They say she isolated, dropped out of dance and piano.
So once she started isolating, and we knew that there was a bigger issue here behind, we started to look for help. We started, she was in multiple places, multiple programs for help.
Some were residential, some not, most dealing with depression and anxiety. But it didn't end there.
Other things came along as the more residential she went into, the more things she acquired, by looking at what others were doing. So that was also a downfall to that.
From there, it was much more pronounced than a roller coaster ride.
Ultimately, Carly's mental health issues displayed themselves in the form of an eating disorder.
We had done all of our research and talked to the experts, and everything that she had, both the psychiatric pieces and the physical ailments that were now starting to be a result of her anorexia. We knew that those were all recoverable.
There were glimmers of hope.
She was spirited. She was enthusiastic. She was talking, within the last few months, she was talking about, things she was going to do later.
But ultimately, all those ailments that her parents knew were recoverable, Carly never fully recovered from.
It was when people gave up on her, when a psychiatrist or a therapist said, I can't help you anymore, or when a hospital said, you know what, you need to be somewhere else. You need to be in a different program, and we can't help you.
Or we heard it was too complex, which mental illness is complex. So no matter how you look at it, it's not easy, but the system doesn't want to look into it, and they don't want to spend the time.
Shortly before Carly's 18th birthday, one doctor recommended to John and Debbie that they get guardianship for Carly, allowing them to make medical decisions on her behalf once she became an adult.
And a lot of these people are sick enough where they don't know that they need the help. And like in her case, a doctor down there said, if you don't get guardianship, she will be dead within a year from being 18.
And when the doctors are saying things like this to you, as parents, what is running through your minds?
At that point, it was, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll do whatever it takes. And we spent, tens, hundreds of hours, working on it and working on what we needed to do. And all the while, we're also working with the hospitals or fighting the hospitals to try to get her the care that she needs.
Several of the programs Carly entered offered 90 days of treatment. After that,
most of the time we've had her for a long period of time. We've done what we can. Now you guys need to keep it going.
And I don't think people realize, how many, as parents, we did a lot of fighting and a lot of, like I said, we got several more years probably out of our daughter, which is a terrible, terrible thing to say, but it's the truth. She would have been gone a long time ago if we didn't fight and appeal and do all those things.
Carly did pass away in February earlier this year. She was just 22 years old. In her obituary, her father, John, wrote in part, "For those medical professionals that thought that Carly should be allowed to die in peace, shame on you for not realizing that you were listening to a mental illness that was successful in convincing you that there was no hope for a 15 to 19-year-old adolescent." More of our discussion on mental health ahead tonight. If you or a loved one are facing a crisis and need help, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. Call or text to connect for one-on-one support for mental health, suicide, and substance use-related counseling. I wanted to open it up to all of you, talking about how the influence of others can have such an impact. And this means everything from social media to bullying to even just when you're in person rehab or something and you're mirroring what you're seeing other people doing, even if they're not the best habits.
I guess I want to just mention and respond to what you were saying about all those factors, those dimensions. I think it's really important to note that there's so many factors involved in mental health, and certainly, there's a difference between, mental health and serious mental illness too. So I just want to delineate that, and that those factors of wellness, financial health, and whether you're struggling with friends, and whether you're struggling with adapting to school, or whether it's a family problem. I think all those factors, societal factors especially, can lead into a decline of that mental health state. So
Yeah, I think that's really important that we do look at all the factors. So all that is really great. This is such a challenging age because people within that age group tend to be, they're trying to reach out for autonomy, separating from home, separating from parents. And, parents were kind of the role model for childhood, right? So now we look for role models amongst us. And, with the bombarding of social media and pressure, peer pressure, all those things, it has a really tremendous influence. And then sometimes it can be a good influence for our teens and our young adults. But a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah.
So I think treatment that involves, really working with that person individually to help them understand that really they're okay who they are, and help them to develop who they are and not compare themselves to other people and try to be somebody else or think that, this person on social media is better than them, they have more friends or more likes or whatever, is just a really important part of that process.
And I think that applies not just to adolescents, but to anybody of any age,
absolutely.
right?
So you can have those
clear
same
here.
problems in your 80s.
Exactly, exactly.
I think that we're not telling them enough that when they're looking at social media, they're looking at a curated lifestyle.
Right.
It's something that somebody has really worked hard at to make sure that this is what people are seeing. It's not what people are living. And you're never going to live up to that.
Yeah. When mental illness becomes a medical problem, after the break, we check back with the Kemp family. When it came to getting medical treatment for their daughter Carly, John and Debbie Kemp say they did everything they could.
She was in a hospital, in a local hospital, She had been in the hospital a couple times before in an eating disorder program. One of the 3 comprehensive care centers for eating disorders in New York State is right here in the local area. And she had been in that previously, and they decided that this time that they weren't going to help her.
Carly was 18 or 19 years old at the time and struggling with an eating disorder, as well as both the physical and mental complications that stem from it. Her parents say the hospital essentially gave them an ultimatum.
They said, if you don't stop refusing, maybe you need to be on hospice, because that's your only option going forward if you don't accept treatment, what we're trying to do for you.
They say offering hospice moved things in the wrong direction for Carly.
And at that point, she was like, wow, this sounds like this is a new thing that I should try out. So, and
She learned from that. She was very smart. She knew now that she could basically say, I don't want treatment. I'm not going to get better. And we knew that that wasn't the case.
John and Debbie say there were psychiatric pieces and physical ailments that were starting to be a result of Carly's anorexia.
It was anorexia, it was OCD. Her final diagnosis had, B-type personality disorders, factitious disorder in it, anxiety, major depressive disorder. So it was a combination of a lot of things.
Physically, her parents say she suffered from gastrointestinal problems, nausea, and an inability to move food through the intestines.
But her OCD was also very powerful,
Yep.
probably more so powerful than the eating disorder, and she just could not eat. And she ended up having a stroke, and probably because she was so malnourished, the lowest BMI she had ever been at. And she just never came out of it, and her body just couldn't handle it. All kinds of heart things happened, and she was just very sick.
Not to mention infections as a result of sepsis, electrolyte dysregulation, and fluctuating blood pressure. Over the years, the Kemps sought help not only in the capital region, but also downstate, in western New York, even out in Denver. But the outcome was always the same.
They handled the acute medical piece of it, and they had promised that we'll keep going through the psychiatric therapeutic portion of it. At the end of 90 days, they gave up. That was
That's pretty much the pattern. So she just kept plummeting every single time she came back from even the best facilities.
The eating disorder facilities, they know what they're dealing with for the most part. It's the medical units that just don't know.
Well, and Sharon, you brought up an interesting point that I did want to touch on, too. There is a distinction here between mental health and mental illness.
The fact that there are serious mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and bipolar, which my son lives with, that are debilitating to one's life. And I think that, for me, the distinction is that, right? When a serious mental illness is a mental illness that is debilitating to your life, and that affects your whole person in every aspect of your life, and it may be something you live with always. Whereas, mental health issues we all have, and some of us have more extreme, experiences with that than others. Typically, from my perspective, those come in waves. And Dr. Stone, you can expand on this, but I feel like it's important to know that it's normal to feel depressed, and it's normal to feel anxious when you're, in front of an audience, or those kind of things are very normal. And I think normalizing that is important for us, that we can share and we can bind in those experiences. Whereas, also understanding that people who live with serious mental illness really need supports, and they need understanding, I think, from society as a whole, that their disease is as important and should be treated as such as a physical disease, diabetes, heart disease. I think, from my perspective, that we have a long way to go there in normalizing and equating healthcare to where we need to go.
And the effects that it can have on families.
And the effects that it can have on families.
And not only families, but the other people around them.
I mean, that's a huge thing, right? And then I brought up support systems in the beginning, and that, part of being a support system is also feeling like you can help and that you can support. rather than feeling hopeless, like you have to just, listen to what everybody's saying and kind of, stand behind closed doors. I think it's very empowering for families and those in one's support system to be part of that, to understand it, to become educated. I'm a big proponent of educating yourself about whatever it is you're facing, whether it's a physical ailment or whether it's a mental health related issue, that you become empowered as a family member so that you can best support your loved one through that.
And empowered and educated,
Yes.
right? I think that's a big part of it.
Our mental health special, Breaking the Silence, continues after the break. A family's message for others in the face of mental illness and what some lawmakers are doing for mental health initiatives in the Capital Region and beyond.
We're getting different perspectives on mental health and how you can reach professionals for those in need of care. We've spoken with experts and with people who have real stories involving their loved ones. And now we're speaking from those who have the power to affect real change, the lawmakers. I'm joined now by Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara. This is a big and important topic, and obviously May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm just curious from you, who's speaking with constituents all the time, lawmakers all the time, what are you seeing as some of the biggest mental health issues or mental illness issues that are coming up right now?
Well, this is a very serious concern, as you said, and it's not a new topic. It's a topic that's been discussed for years and years. And at the state capitol, there's plenty of legislation that speaks to mental health in all categories, whether it's in the school system, whether it's veterans we're talking about, people with disabilities. We have discussed topics and had a lot of hearings to get feedback, and also monitoring our agencies to see what's being done. From my constituency, we hear about, I'm involved in the disability community, but also the veterans community. I did serve in the reserves, and I belong to a lot of veterans service organizations. A lot of times we hear about people's veterans that are seeking services. Sometimes that can be challenging, and one of the things we've been trying to do at the Capitol is try to make that information more accessible. There are programs out there in a number of different categories to serve veterans, just making sure that we're connecting people, a better connection, knowing where the resources are and how to access them. And of course, there's always the stigma. People are sometimes just not comfortable coming forward. So some of the bills that I've worked on are making sure that is as easy as possible.
What are some of the other pieces of legislation that I know you're on the standing committee on mental health?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we were able to do, I think, was a step forward, is we expanded our veterans treatment courts, making sure that our veterans, veterans when they are in the court system, these courts allow transfers between counties so they can access these courts, ensuring they get the support that they need, and addressing things like PTSD or whatever the situation may be, to make sure they get the help and support. And these courts are specialized and trained in providing these services and identifying the needs and making sure that they're identified early and that we are getting them the support they need. So that I think was a big step forward. The Dwyer peer-to-peer program is a big one. And that is a program that connects veterans with other veterans to make sure they're comfortable in a comfortable setting. Veterans connecting with veterans we find is very positive. It's something that is effective. It works. This is a program. I've pushed for increased funding on this program every year because it is so effective. Each year we do a display, and we put flags in the ground, and what it does is it gives a visual as to how many veterans are lost to suicide each year, and that number is 8,030. So at the town of Florida Veterans Memorial Park, we put those flags in the ground, and we leave them there.
You talked about, the constituents do reach out to your office with various things. When is it at a threshold where you recommend that people definitely reach out, that it's time to get a lawmaker involved with a certain issue? Or
I'm in the community quite a bit. I spend time at the Capitol, during session, time in my district office, but I also like to be in the community, be accessible, to hear. A lot of times people won't come to your office, especially if it's an issue like this. They may not come to your office to talk to you about this, but if you're in a community, you might be able to connect with someone. and be able to hear some of the challenges.
Yeah.
And whether it's, like I said, I chair the committee on people with disabilities, so I do hear
Yeah.
emails, I get phone calls, but sometimes the in-person connection, not necessarily in an office setting, but in a comfortable community setting, I tend to hear challenges, and I take note of those things, and sometimes they become good legislation.
Right, because people need to realize, I think it's important to note that there is this stigma. They don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
But if they are willing to open up a little bit to somebody like you, it can provide change and hope, for the future for these issues.
And that's it. What people may not realize is a lot of the bills that we talk about up there, a lot of the bills that come to the floor originate with a conversation, and that's how it happens. So having those conversations are very important. I mean, certainly if there's issues where we can connect people with services, we want to do that too. Sometimes I talk to people that come in with issues, with some challenges or things they're looking to discuss, and I'm able to connect them with services that they may not even know existed. And that's part of the challenge. There's a lot of programs in place, and unfortunately the funding that we put in them a lot of times goes unused because people don't access those services for whatever reason. I grew up in the city of Schenectady. Both my parents were immigrants. They were new to this country. I was the first one born here, and we lived in one house. My parents, my aunt, my grandmother, all in one house. Nobody spoke English. So I got all the way to first grade. I never spoke a word of English, and I was just a very quiet kid.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that, someone took the time to notice that there was something wrong.
Right.
And I at that point, I didn't know if I was going to make it through school. But someone believed that they can make a difference in my life. And whether it was a teacher, a friend, a neighbor, all of the above, took some time to help me.
Yeah.
To help me get through. And that's the power that we have. So, stories like that exist today, where you can make a difference in someone's life. So they may be experiencing a bad day, some challenges, maybe they don't speak the language, maybe there's a number of issues, but reaching out to that person, finding help for them, or helping them yourself, making a difference in their day, that can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
I've experienced it, and I know that we can do it for other people. So sometimes it's not everything I'm talking about
Right.
here. Sometimes it's just as important what happens in our community,
Yeah.
just as important.
You can find this entire conversation at cbs6albany.com. As John and Debbie Kemp continue to mourn the loss of their daughter, Carly,
I actually wrote that obituary about a year ago, most of it.
Yep.
Because you thought that was the end.
There were
she had
several
a-
times that she had been
She had a
that
she had
low.
they have a message for others who are acting as the support system for anyone suffering from mental illness.
As parents, you're the expert. You are the expert on your child. Don't let anybody, any provider, any
Hospital.
any friends,
Hospital.
tell you what
Right.
needs to be done.
Not only are caregivers the most educated on their loved ones, the Kemps say they also took it upon themselves to become educated on the issues from which their daughter was suffering.
You will notice those changes before anybody else, and you will know how your child will react to different treatments or changes, more so than anybody else will. And so make sure that you and that others know and providers know that you have done your research. And that's the other piece of it. It's just the education.
Their education wound up being useful when it came to working with providers.
We became experts in the connections
Advocates.
that we made with different people from as far away as California and Denver and Texas and Florida and New York City and in this area. We had more contacts than any other provider that was out there, and we provided them with the publications and with the research that had been done in that case.
At times, they felt better educated than some of Carly's providers.
We've been told that out of 8 years of doctor getting their education, their experience, something like 2 hours is spent on eating disorders.
Out of the
Out
whole
of 8 years. Highest mortality rate of any mental illness is with eating disorders. And so with that, to only have 2 hours be spent during an entire 8-year period focused on that, clearly it's not enough.
When Carly died, John and Debbie published an obituary that stood out from other obits, using strong words to call out the healthcare system and how it failed their daughter, saying in part, quote, "We really can't thank any hospitals for their care because they all turned her away in the end after talking to their legal teams and said they couldn't help her and we should just bring her home and let her pass away." There was one doctor who they said stood out among the rest.
Even though the hospital didn't want to treat her, we had one doctor that spent every single day, first, listening to us and listening to the people that we had talked to nationwide, experts, and then every day he spent hours looking for places and talking to people.
That allowed them to find help for Carly out in Denver. At one point, they also used billboards and protests outside hospitals to get their message across to providers.
And that did get attention, and we got a change in her treatment as a result of that.
Now that Carly has passed, John and Debbie are taking what they've learned and trying to help other caregivers in similar positions.
That education piece is something that I'm committed to trying to help, especially locally.
They have an ongoing thread with experts they met during the fight for Carly's life as they try to bring more education to providers locally. They've also relied on nonprofit organizers like Flutters of Hope in Saratoga County. Carly Kemp was honored at their eating disorder walk in Saratoga Springs earlier this month. And there's one message the Kemps have for caregivers: be careful what you tell patients in need.
It's when the message is, you have no hope, treatment is futile. It's when they hear that their chances of recovery and survival go down tremendously. There is no such thing as a terminal mental illness. There's no terminal anorexia. There's no terminal OCD. Those diagnoses don't exist for a reason, because they are treatable. They only become terminal when they're not treated, and when people suffering from those mental illnesses and their families are pushed out of the system and don't get the treatment that they need.
More of our discussion on mental health ahead tonight. If you or a loved one are facing a crisis and need help, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. Call or text to connect for one-on-one support for mental health, suicide, and substance use-related counseling.
You might have a doctor that's writing off some aspect of what you're trying to talk to them about. They think it's, oh, you're just anxious. But maybe they're not just anxious. Maybe there's something more going on there. And then, I mean, what do you recommend that people do in a situation like that where you feel like maybe the doctor is writing me or my loved one off?
Advocate.
Yeah, right?
Advocate. And I feel really strongly about this. I have an experience with my mom when my mom was going through cancer treatments, and she kind of taught me this. So, thank you, Mom. She's in heaven now. But to take a notebook in with you to your doctor's appointments. Always bring somebody with you. It doesn't have to be a serious thing, but bring someone with you to the doctor so they can write down a few questions, or they can write down a few answers. They can write down what's being said, because when you're in the moment, you forget to ask the question you wanted to ask. You forget to, what the doctor told you to do or how they told you to sleep or whatever. Like, you forget. So having someone there with you who's advocating and supporting you, as well as being an advocate and support for someone going through something, mental illness or physical as well.
Absolutely. And just to add on to that, ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're in that doctor's visit, ask questions. Your doctor will answer, but can't answer unless you ask, right?
Yeah.
So bring the notebook, have things you want to do, but as things come up in the visit, inquire about it.
Right.
I always say, and don't be afraid to ask for a second opinion.
Yeah.
If you don't like your provider, there is always another provider.
That's true.
Sometimes you and that provider will not jive.
Yeah. Trust your gut.
Yes. Yes. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. Yeah.
Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Dr. Stone, you have the beauty of you're working in an integrated space, which we were just touching on a little bit here. I mean, what about people who they're going to a doctor's office and it's not so integrated, and they're there for one thing, and maybe there's a physical component that starts to spring up, but there's still a mental component, and getting all of the care that you need, making it a holistic thing. How can people go about doing that? It's hard, I would imagine.
Come to us.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what you're doing is fun.
It should not actually be hard. It should
It
not
shouldn't
be
be
hard.
hard, but
be.
you know, interestingly, data now supports, and this is a couple of years old, so I'm sure it's increased since then. But 70% of primary care visits are psychosocially driven. 70%.
Wow.
So to your point, you go to your doctors. There's other things involved, right? So obviously, the best thing to do is to try to just get your patient connected through more of a cold handoff rather than saying, you know, here's a couple of mental health providers. Good luck.
Right.
Right. So try to get connected and also have the, I guess I would encourage the patient to inquire of their doctor, is there anybody that you could recommend me to or refer me to or any way I could get some help with this?
And then doing your own research, right? Doing your
Yeah.
own digging to find out where there is access to the care that you need, I think is important to be your own advocate. I'm going to say that again and again because
Yeah, yeah.
from a family standpoint and being through what I've been through with my son, he would have never taken those steps.
Yeah.
He couldn't
Yes.
physically and emotionally take those steps. So making calls and you know, diving into the internet to learn about the disease or joining a support group to understand. I just think like knowledge is power. You have to do your research. Don't just stop at, I didn't really feel good about that interaction
Right.
at the hospital or my doctor's office or whatever. Dig in, see what more you can find, because there are resources. We're learning and we're getting better. This is so exciting, what you're doing. It makes me emotional because I didn't have that with my son 15 and 20 years ago, right? This has exploded in the last 5 years, thank you to the pandemic.
Right.
But people are talking about it. We're opening up conversations about it. We're actually seeing movement and care. It's exciting. It's exciting for me to see as a family member, and so there's more resources than there's ever been before.
Yeah.
Well, that's great news. I love to hear that you're so excited. I'm really sorry that it wasn't available for you, but I love to hear your excitement now. And I think one of the important things, too, about integrated care is you were such an advocate and your family for your son, right? And that is huge. That's important, and we need that. But one of the great things about integrated care is you have now a team behind you also advocating for your son,
Yeah,
right?
amazing.
And it takes a village.
I just wanted to share one success, one win that my son and I had, our family had, was with the ACT team. It's Assertive Community Treatment. You may have heard of it. And that team approach, that multidisciplinary approach, the person-centered approach, the recovery-oriented approach is what saved his life. Because he had a team of people around him who were keeping an eye out, right? And they were communicating with me. And I was communicating with them. If I saw something of concern, I would communicate. If they did, they would communicate. And so we've had this circle of support around him that's been hands down a life changer.
Yeah, it is a life changer. And, you know, I think one more point that we have to bring up is as the family is advocating, you're going through a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I think one of the other important factors is providing support for the family while they're providing support for the
Thank you.
family member.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Where are some of the areas that you would still like to see changes being made? And do you have any ideas of like what we can do as a society to try and make those changes happen?
You know, I think that people are always talking about, you know, everybody needs to be CPR and first aid trained. Everybody should get that. And, you know, you hear it talked about. I think everybody needs to really concentrate on getting mental health first aid training. And it's not because I want to get rid of all social workers and mental health counselors. Mental health first aid training really does help people recognize the signs and symptoms of when somebody is struggling. And it allows them to have those tools to say, hey, I need you to get somewhere. Hey, I need you to figure out what resources are out there in the community. It allows us to have more people in the community who are trained advocates, who understand what is going on with people mentally. We talked about physical care. we also need to talk about that mental care that people need.
I think
That
that's
term
really
mental health first aid is something I've never even heard. So that just goes to show you like where we're at with that.
There's a lot of free training for
Yes.
mental health first aid trainers.
Yeah.
Yes, there's lots of mental health first aid trainers in our area.
I would love to see everybody in our society or our world be trained in CPR and mental health first aid.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, great point. That's a great program, and it really like educates people on how to deal with different situations that could be related to mental health. But I think even a broader way is just education. Like, let's educate people more that this, in most cases, is a normal part of life. I read something just a couple of days ago. If you don't experience a behavioral health, mental health problem in your life, you're probably not human. All right? So let's educate people that this is normal. I mean, even in today's society, I have people coming to me, we have people coming to us that, will say things like, you'll normalize what they're going through, and they'll say, oh, so I'm not crazy?
Yeah.
And you're like, no. This is a normal result of what you've been experiencing.
Right. In
And
fact,
it's okay if you are.
Yeah.
If you are feeling that way, it's okay.
Right, but once
know?
they're, even from I think like a community perspective or even a patient perspective, if the patient understands how what they've been going through links to what they're experiencing, then they realize it's normal.
We also need to normalize getting help early. I think that sometimes people believe you have to be in crisis. The only people that go and talk to a therapist are, I'm experiencing absolute crisis, my life is going absolutely wrong, and that's when I need to go seek out a therapist. I'm having an issue, I need some talk therapy, I got a referral, I'm gonna go talk to somebody. That's when you should be doing it prior to being in crisis, because at crisis time, it's not as effective. It's more effective before you get to the crisis point. So we need to normalize it then.
again, a difficult conversation, but it doesn't have to be. There's so much more to be said about mental health and mental illness. CBS 6 has covered stories on the matter for years, so if you have a story you want to share and reach others with, reach out to us. If you or a loved one are facing emotional crisis and need help, the National 988 Crisis Hotline is always there. You can call or text 24/7. For CBS 6, I'm Lara Brin.